Good day. My name is Ed McFerran. I'm with Tax Deferred Exchange Services. If you're listening and watching this particular video, you're anticipating completing a reverse exchange. A reverse exchange is a very different transaction for us because in a forward exchange, we are relinquishing a property, which means that you're going to sell the property, and after you sell that property, we're going to take the proceeds from that property and acquire another, what we call replacement property. That's the typical forward delayed tax deferred exchange. Hopefully by now, you've taken a look at the video that we have on reverse exchanges. This video is intended to augment that first video, so if you're listening and watching this video now, you may want to turn it off and go back and watch and look at the video on reverse exchanges that goes over the basic ingredients. This video goes along with those basic ingredients of the first video, but we focus on financing of reverse exchanges. It was intended originally that there would be enough information in the first video, but we found that our clients are looking for still more additional information. We also find that the banking community is looking for some additional information. So this particular video is provided to you, our clients, and also provided to your bankers to help and assist you and them to obtain financing for your reverse exchange. Let's go through some basics. A reverse exchange is a strategy that's approved by the Internal Revenue Service, allowing a party such as ourselves, your qualified intermediary, doing a different job called a qualified property investment holder, whereby we acquire the replacement property, that what we call that to die for property, and we acquire it and hold it on your behalf. We call it parking that property until your other relinquished property closes. This particular strategy occurs for most people when they do find that replacement property, wanting to do a tax deferred exchange, but find that their relinquished property hasn't been listed, hasn't sold, or in some cases we come on board because right before the closing, their sale transaction, it fails. And they're looking to acquire the replacement property, but they need more time after the replacement property closes in order to get the relinquished property closed and sold. Rule, important rule. An exchanger, who is the party that completes tax deferred exchange, such as you, cannot exchange into a property that you already own. Let me do that one more time. An exchanger such as you, who is completing a tax deferred exchange, cannot exchange or acquire a property that you already own. And of course, if you find that to die for property and you buy it, acquire it, close on it, and own it, that becomes a disqualified property for purposes of completing your forward tax deferred exchange. This is why we become an important aspect of the successful completion of a reverse exchange, in that we, as a qualified exchange title holder, are authorized under federal law to acquire your replacement property and hold it during the time period necessary until your relinquished property closes. That's the good news. The bad news is we don't buy the property, we don't finance the property, we don't provide the money for the purposes of purchasing the property. We just merely purchase the property on your behalf, but we need the money from you or from a third-party source in order to accomplish the reverse exchange. This is an important consideration. In my previous reverse exchange video, I would have used the term, many are called, but few are chosen. And what I mean by that is that in the area of reverse exchanges, when we're first talking with a client such as yourself, we ask the question, can you complete the acquisition of the replacement property through our office where we purchase the replacement property, doing so without obtaining the money or financing from the sale of the relinquished property? The answer is no. You are probably not going to be able to complete a reverse exchange. We buy the property, We do so based upon, in essence, borrowing the money from you, who in essence may have the money yourselves, and that occurs sometimes, or may have the money from a third-party lender, such as a bank or a local lender, or may have the money from a family member or 401k or some other investment device. But the key thing here is, this is not a type of transaction wherein you will be able to go to a mortgage lender, such as a Bank of America, Chase, Fannie Mae type of lender, and obtain financing for the acquisition of the replacement property, because you cannot obtain the financing for the property. We actually have to. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't guarantee the financing for the property. It just merely means that the financing for the property has to be given to us. We have to be the borrower. You can be the guarantor, but you cannot be the borrower for purposes of purchasing the replacement property. So what we have here is typically, for most of our clients, if they don't have the cash. I did have a client recently, we had a consultation with them in our office and told the client about the need for cash. She was concerned about the bank, and of course she thought for just a moment, and she says, well, I do have a bank, the Bank of Dad. So keep in mind, relatives are certainly good opportunities to obtain financing, and the Bank of Dad provided financing for our purposes of purchasing the replacement property, and we did so by paying back Dad the money that we borrowed after we sold the relinquished property. So in that regard, it's an important consideration to understand that the financing for a reverse exchange is going to be more difficult to accomplish. It's going to involve a lender that's not going to be a residential mortgage lender. It's not going to be a residential mortgage broker. It's not going to be a Bank of America or Chase unless you're dealing with their commercial department. It's typically going to be a lender who is providing commercial services. For instance, in our local area in the state of Washington, Columbia Bank, Heritage Bank, other Home Street Bank, other local lenders typically provide the financing of this sort. A bit of caution, if you are in one state and you are anticipating buying a property in a reverse exchange in another state that involves financing, be very, very cautious, because most of the financing in that other state will only be available from brokers in that other state. And since we are the borrowers and we are located within the state of Washington, we're going to have a very difficult time obtaining financing from a lending institution in a different state. So generally speaking, you're going to find that we're going to be limited in doing outside third-party bank financing on an interim or balloon basis unless we're going to be operating in the same state. That's an important consideration. If we have this type of transaction and an involvement in this transaction, it's going to be potentially limited in time because, as we indicated in our previous reverse exchange video, the reverse exchange can happen in two different fashions. It can be statutory, which means that it has a 6-month life. It can be classical, which is a term of art that we use in our practice that says it can have a life longer than 6 months and, frankly, an unlimited time period for purposes of the completion of the transaction. Also keep in mind that in many of our reverse exchange transactions that we handle through our office, we are also involved with exchangers such as yourselves that are making improvements on that reverse exchange property. Let me give you an example. Let's pretend for just a moment that your to-die for property is a parcel of raw property. You intend on improving that property in the course of the tax-deferred exchange, and we acquire that raw property by the use of funds that we borrow from you or through you in order to acquire that to-die for raw land investment property. During the time period of the reverse exchange, we, through you, can make improvements on the property and start building on the property, or actually complete buildings on the property during the time period of the reverse exchange. And it is not until the closing of the relinquished property that we start to get into these time periods that limit us in our ability to transfer the property to you. In a statutory reverse exchange, we have 6 months, and a classical reverse exchange, we have an unlimited time period. Most improvement reverse exchanges will involve a classical type of reverse exchange transaction. I think it's important to understand that a reverse exchange transaction is not an inexpensive proposition. Our fees are fixed and are relatively reasonable overall. However, when we combine those together with the potential fees that the lender may charge, including such charges for appraisal and those types of things, the cost of doing a reverse exchange is not going to be extraordinarily high, but it's going to be a higher cost for the completion of a transaction than you would in a normal forward tax-deferred exchange. This overall video is intended to augment, as I said before, the video that we had previously on reverse exchanges. Its overall goal is to help and assist you to understand where you can obtain financing. Number one, if the financing comes from you personally, that is by far the easiest way of completing a reverse exchange. It involves no outside costs, it involves no outside parties, and in fact, the minute we close on the relinquished property sale, we are able right at that time to pay you your money back that we borrowed from you in order to acquire the property in the first place. The second source of funds could be family members or sources of funds that you have in a private fashion. That's certainly going to be less expensive than going to the banker. In the case of the banker, we typically call this a bridge loan. We're looking for temporary financing that we obtain, that you generally guarantee, and upon the closing of the relinquished property, we pay off that financing, all or part of it, and in some cases, the lender may very well have bridge financing or temporary financing, or the lender may provide us long-term financing that merely allows you to acquire our interest in the property and assume the loan, relinquishing us from any involvement in the loan afterwards. These are the permutations or the variations on the theme that occur in a reverse exchange financing situation. This area has a concern that you are talking with appropriate parties. It's important that you understand that your banker needs to have some transactions under his or her belt to understand the financing for a reverse exchange. We're happy to help you. We're happy to talk to your banker, but it's also important that they understand that this does not fit in with the normal cookie cutter type of loan that a residential mortgage broker would provide. This is temporary financing done with a commercial lender, a relative, or your own funds. Thank you very kindly for your help and assistance in allowing us to give a better understanding to you of completing reverse exchanges through financing. Thank you.